Okay, hi everyone. I'm Hannah. I work with Cade Somali Arts. Welcome to our open mic night. This promises to be a lovely gathering of laughs, poetry and arts. We'd like to express our sincere gratitude to our funders, the Heritage Lottery Fund and the Arts Council, and our partners for this event, Oxford House. Our creative cafe events are held every month until October, so we encourage you to check our Eventbrite page or our Instagram, Twitter. Our next event is on the 20th of September, so do come to that. That's a literature event, so it should be amazing. I'm going to hand over to Noura, who's our fantastic host for tonight.
This evening, we're going to have a beautiful discussion around oral transmission of the Somali culture, heritage, and storytelling. So things like folklore and the fairy tales that we're all very much used to. I'm going to be chairing that conversation with some amazing panelists. But before we kick into that, we're just going to start with some poetry. And we're going to kick off with Nomadic Libah, who is the founder of a poeticallyperplexed.com, a platform for creative expression and showcasing diverse artists. Based in London, Nomadic Libah is a rhythmic assisted poet who uses poetry to reimagine, alignment, and explore introspective questions. His works serve as a poetic running dialogue, inviting readers to broaden their perspectives. So, can we please give him a round of applause?
Jazakallah khair. I'll start off with a piece that I know and then I'll go to the book. This one is a short piece that's called In All of It. And it begins. Bismillah. In pain, we find peace. And in pleasure, we find release. For innamal usri yusra. Within hardship, there is ease. Same words on repeat. In pain, we find peace, and in pleasure, we find release. For innamal usri yusra. Within hardship, there is ease. So there is no need to be passive. When the trail paves its own atlas, it becomes a map to the path attracted. A balance for the fraction that broke parts into fragments, as each action holds a reaction. So within my mind is a place, and within my heart is a pain that flows through my veins. And of course, it lingers as it stays, circumventing the navigation my brain tries to take as receptors overstimulate. Simply said, the things that weigh on my heart play heavy on my head. Is there enough time to make more of this thing called life? Is there a chance I can fulfill my why, to give in ways that give meaning to why? For in pain, we find peace, and in pleasure, we find release. For innamal usri yusra. Within hardship, there is ease. Thank you. Jazakallah khair. Like I said, that piece is called In All of It, which simply talks about the journey that we inadvertently go through in life through thoughts, actions, and intentions. The piece that I'm going to read for you now is called Where Do We Grow? A question that comes to mind sometimes. Bismillah. It gets dark when it feels hard to survive. The days fade away into the night, then repeat till first daylight. A cycle unlike anything kind, when past thoughts cloud the mind and remind of everything you've tried to leave behind. But again, these feelings make it feel as if you're dead inside, but on the outside, ever more alive. For you played the piper, but never paid the price. Plagued with time, but never downsized. You plagiarized the why to fortify the lies of a dreadful mind, where tenacious thoughts are ill-derived, cultivating a capsule, unbeknownst to the inner self trapped inside. For is today a mirror of the mind, mirroring thoughts pushed aside into a mirage of a facade self-prescribed. For how can you hide what pushes you to thrive? The meaning for your life, the medium to your light, more than the reasons or the why. If not yet knowing, simply look inside. Because the different parts of you are more than what meets the eye. So I ask, do you live a life you like to anything you didn't like? Or do you live a life you love for what you love is to be alive? But how can you live when it feels hard to exist? Knowing all you've experienced and all that is, well, easier said than done. Isn't that what life truly is? For when past times mirror the present, it takes away from every second. When each second you're in comes second to each second you've lived, how can you ever understand the merit of time been equipped? When not taking into account the weight of experience, as each experience creates its own rift, maybe even in the form of a mental shift, depending on how internalized and relived. Either revived in better parts or revised for severed marks upon a delicate heart turned derelict and dark. From old oaths turned to new omens, fond memories and promises untold, making a malleable mind value the lines used to remember when pondering once upon a... In essence, what I'm really trying to say is acknowledgement is where to begin, to find the strength that lies within. When you know you're worthy of your right to live, it breeds an energy which translates and shifts the tides of waves, bringing change to what is. So, to learn and forgive, to remember yet still resist the intrusive thoughts that cease to persist. For your future is yours if you wish. For your future is yours if you wish. Simply ask the Creator, for His favor is immeasurable and endless. When your agenda is redemption or positive progression, it's all based on the sincerity of your intention, cemented by the action's endings. So I say all of that to say this. May all our lives favor where we intend to rest, being the place where we grow along the eternal quest, solidifying the outcome of the test. Alas, on to the next. Thank you all very much. Jazakallah khair. I have one final piece for you, which is entitled Nation of Poets. As you know, Somalia is called, or may not know, the Nation of Poets because our history is an oral history passed down through generation through gabay, aka poetry. Bismillah. My people's pain will never be in vain. The blood through my veins is how their legacy remains. I come from a derelict terrain where poverty and pain remain and never change. From dark days filled with death to war-torn towns with no prospects. A nation separated by colonial lines. People divided by allegiance to tribe. Each tribe with their own pride, so they could never put their differences aside for the betterment of their own people's lives. In the past, this wouldn't pass. People put into a different class simply because of caste. Oh my, how the world has changed so fast. Before the colonization, degradation, humiliation, separation, suffocation and asphyxiation of my sovereign nation, Somalia was an oasis of knowledge and creation. The ancient Egyptians called it the land of Punt, the land of God. The ancient Greeks knew it as the land of Barbaroi. The ancient Romans called it Regio Cinemaphore, the land of cinnamon. As far back as 2000 BC, the ancient Egyptians used to travel down the Red Sea for frankincense, myrrh, and whatever else they may need. Somalia was a place of wealth indeed. Somali people are nomadic in nature. Known throughout the ages as Great Sea merchants and traders, our history was not written in pages, but maintained through oral recitation. A pivotal point at the time of this great nation is when Islam entered the equation. This defining moment of Somali history created a sense of community. All became equal before one God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Through testifying that there is only one God and Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is his messenger. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadur Rasulullah. Community is unity. And when my people were united, they were immovable and enlightened. Through an understanding of the Holy Quran, they gained strength and built Iman, forging plans to pioneer and prosper for the greater good of the motherland. Jazakallah khair. Thank you all very much. Big up Kado, Somali Arts. Hebben we next.
Can we get another round of applause for Nomadic Libah, aka Ali? So like Ali touched on, this portion of the evening will be around the conversation that we're going to have, and the topic of the panel discussion is passing on generational stories through the tradition of storytelling. So like I said, today's discussion will be centered around passing down identity from generation to generation by means of oral traditions and storytelling. Like was mentioned earlier, the art of storytelling isn't anything new to the Somali people, whether you're in the diaspora or living within the Somali regions, and plays quite an important part with the formation of our identity, whether in the West or, our homes, so to speak. So we're going to just dive right into it with the first question being, how important really is it to maintain the tradition of oral storytelling so that we can maintain our identities? To everyone.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. How important is it? I think it's crucial because I'm really grateful to actually be born back home and spend a lot of time back home as a child. And most of the stories I grew up and I remember are those that are told by my grandparents, and going to the Miga and sitting there and sitting amongst the elders and hearing their stories. And so those stories then passed on to me by my father, and we traditionally then pass it on to our children. So I think for us, in order to maintain our culture, our heritage, and for our children, the next generations, to be able to have an element of exploring that and falling in love with their culture and heritage, being able to pass on those stories alongside of them forging their own stories also within the culture. I think it's crucial.
Also, I have a similar experience. I was in Somalia until I was about seven years old, and I was fortunate enough to be in the actual Miyi up until that point. And so my memories are sort of just this really wonderful culture of like being around animals and, you know, like being surrounded by stories and just utter freedom. Like, and so I remember how that, I feel like it really, from an early age, really built who I am. And it's kind of, it gives you that pride and almost like a safe place that you can kind of revisit as you go through the years. And that's something that you can pass on to your children in terms of language, identity, bonding, all of the beautiful things that stories bring people together. And so, yeah, I think it's extremely important. It also helps you to be proud of where you come from.
Yeah, definitely. I think somebody who knows his history or their history and where they come from, they walk different to somebody who doesn't. If you know, we all know the image that Somalis have got out there, and that can have a really bad, I think, psychological effect on young Somalis growing up. And just by tapping into that culture, tapping into that rich history, it kind of strips away a lot of that. Allah Naharis to my grandma. I remember I was speaking to her last year, and she would tell me, like, I've never had the privilege of going back home like these two. Allah Mubarak, bro. But, you know, I was having a conversation with my grandma. She was explaining to me a lot of history, of the family history. And, you know, although I consider myself, you know, someone who's kind of clued up on the culture and who's got, like, a lot of love for the culture and the history, just having that personal history, you know, told to me and the poetry from my family and knowing where they were and how they lived, it just completely changed a lot of my perspective on just my family, and it gives you something, you know.
Can I just add to that?
Of course.
You reminded me something. My mum and dad stayed, I was lucky enough to have my mum and dad stay with me for a week before they went back home last summer. They have their own home, so they tend to be in their own home, but they decided to do a little tour of every one of their children. So in that time, I spent time recording stories they were telling. And what was beautiful is the one my dad told about the time he met my mum and how he proposed. Not proposed, but how he asked for her hand in marriage. And it was cute seeing my mum there telling me her version of that story. It's so different. And the reason why I recorded that, it was for my own children to be able to see. And also I wanted to have some level of, I don't know, stories left behind, if not written, but I think orally, that way of me recording it digitally, them telling their stories, is something that I can pass on to the next generation. So I believe, again, that sense of pride that we have, that we pass on hopefully to the next generation, does come from that oral history.
Yeah, can I just also add, a few years ago, I asked my mum to tell me, because I've forgotten a lot of the stories that I was surrounded by, and I would just remember bits and bobs. And so a few years ago, I sat with my mum and I said, tell me some stories. Because basically my mum has the most incredible memory. But mashallah, she doesn't necessarily, she's like very wadad and like she's about her Quran and everything. But if you sit with her and ask her to tell you those stories, she will. And it was just so incredible because like, it's just made our connection so much deeper, and it just, you know, it helped with the language, and I was able to like record them and translate them into English, and it was just so amazing. And I was able to like share with my children as well. So I think it's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, thank you. I think you all gave like really beautiful answers. And the thing about memory is like, memory is such a blessing, but we only have memory to a certain point. Like we could face ill health, you know, we could not even be in a position to even record it. So it's really important for us in a time where we have our health to be able to record those stories, just so that the future generation can look back and not feel like there are lost files, so to speak, or have somebody else from a completely different background and culture tell our stories for us. And I think that's the real importance that we're trying to drive home when we talk about about the importance of, storytelling and sharing those folk tales, no matter how ridiculous they might be, right? We've all had those folk tales where like they either make you really happy or you're scared to go to bed. But that's the beauty of it all. That's the beauty of preserving culture. Like, you take the good with the bad, but it's important for us to be able to record that in the first instance. So I think when the question is, how important, I don't think there is any other answer than absolutely important, right? Yeah. So I just kind of want to jump into more of a technical question. So I'm going to direct this to you, Ibrahim, just because you deal with more of, I guess, the metric side of things. And obviously, it would be great for us just to sit here and think you just put words together, right? But there's actually a science to it. There's an art to it. So could you kind of just talk a little bit about those systems, specifically from southern Somalia, something that you've studied in, and then also if you could kind of like provide us with what you're understanding and shaping those systems in order to tell those stories moving forward.
Yeah. So you guys have probably heard the word gabay thrown about a few times today, and gabay is just one form of Somali poetry. There are hundreds of different forms that have all different metrics, or they all follow a different metric template. So what that means is Somali is like quite a syllable-based language. So each poetry form has a different kind of how do I say? It's kind of like there are a different number of syllables used in each line, and different number of syllables used in each line, and also they're arranged in different ways. So the gabay will have something like 20 syllables used in a line. The jifta will have like 9. The walwalay will have like 12. And there are hundreds of different forms, and they're all used for different things. The gabay is used to tackle big social political issues. The jifta was originally a dance song. The walwalay is a work song. And there's a lot of stuff like that. My research right now is mainly on southern Somali poetry because that's been neglected. And when I say southern, depending on who you ask, that could be anything south of Bosaso or anything south of Adale, right? So just the way I define it is that poetry that's composed in a southern Somali dialect. So what's spoken in the Shabelle regions and Banadir specifically, and what's spoken in Afmaha, not Afmai. North will be like anything above that. So, Mudug and Waqooyi and Djibouti and all of that. And southern Somali poetry has been neglected for a lot of reasons I won't go into, political, social, there's a lot of things at play. And so what I've been doing is trying to investigate these meters and forms and kind of do a lot of research in them and bring them kind of to light. And one of the main differences in northern and southern poetry is, number one, line length, right? So what you'll have in southern poetry forms is you'll have a verse that's composed of several lines, and that will be its own verse. And then you might have, for example, there'll be 4 lines. So there's a wedding song in the south, and so they might say, Gabar iyona garob, that's one line. Gogosha inti so gableye, that's another line. Gabar iyona garob, gogosha inti so gableye. Oh, I forgot it, but there's 2 more lines after that, and that's 4 lines, and that will be a single verse of the poem. And then the next verse of the poem has to follow the metric rules of that. So the first line of the first verse and the first line of the second verse will follow the same meter, which are different from the second line of the first verse and the second line of the second verse, right? That isn't really found in northern forms except for one form, because in the northern you have the gabay, it's just one line, and then each line is its own kind of thing, and then it's almost like an essay, line 1, line 2, right? Each line is almost like a mini paragraph almost. And also another thing is couplets are used a lot more. They're used a lot more than in northern Somali poetry. Northern Somali poetry, couplets are only really used in Qarami poems. So you'll have each couplet will have its own little topic, its own letter it alliterates with, its own theme maybe, and that will be kind of mixed together. That will be added to other ones and it'll make a whole song. But in the south, that is most poetry is like that. The gabay, although used in the south, doesn't have the same kind of weight. It doesn't have the same rank. In the north, gabay is king. Gabay is king. Every important historical event is recorded in Gabay. Every war you've heard of, every social, political issue that's happened, you'll find it in a Gabay. But in the South, Gabay isn't really seen in the same way. It's seen as something light. It's seen as a warm-up to the couplets. And the couplets are the things that are remembered, that are passed, that are carried, that are passed through the generations, that are kind of, kept in oral tradition, in the oral memory almost.
Thank you. Very, very educational. I actually was thinking about a question as you were speaking, so it's more of a, for me, barambur, right? I think for most women, like the way in which we interact with, I guess, Somali poetry or like even storytelling or the formation of identity based on like, the clans and the families, etc., is through barambur. What are the clear distinctions between barambur and the sort of like storytelling and poetry formation that you're talking about now? Because I guess that's more melodic. Would that fall into the traditional storytelling?
So Borambur there's two things, right? So there's Botin, which is the dancing that you'll see in the weddings, and then there's the actual poetry from Borambur, which can be used as an accompaniment to the dance, but it can be used separately. So we've got a lot of poetry that are formed in Borambur that talk about social political issues that is used in the same way as the Gabay. But it does have that specific function that you're talking about, where it's used to kind of praise the bride. It's used to talk about lineage. It's used to, preserve a lot of that history and that memory. So it was there was the clear distinctions, right? And it's used to do that kind of stuff. Which the clear distinction here is that it's a female poetry. It's female poetry, and it's one of the few genres that are exclusively for females, right? For women. So the Gabay, although women did do it, was generally reserved for men. But what women did was they got another genre or another melody, but the same meter, and they would sing that as a kind of way of getting away with doing the Gabay, right? But then any other genre, the Gerar, the Jif, the women have, it was for women, but and men. But the Borambur is specifically for women. And it does have this thing of kind of praising the bride and being used at weddings and festive occasions, and kind of recounting lineage and praising the bride which isn't really done in other poetry forms, which is also unique to the Borambur.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So I'm going to direct the next question to you, Var. So being that you have so many multifaceted roles, the question that I wanted to pose, whether it be as an educator or an advocate, presenter, even mentor, to ensure that the rich oral tradition is actually passed down, how is it that you do so with the work that you do and the young women that you interact with?
Teacher's voice. So I'm going to correct you in terms of I don't do YouTube anymore. I did it years ago. I think the younger generation are doing amazing, so I no longer need to do it. But there was a reason why I started things like YouTube and doing radio. And for me was around something that you said, Ibrahim, around the stories that were being told by Somalis. That danger of that one story that was told about who we are in terms of what the students and my kids saw on the news, in the papers, and that really frustrated me as an educator and as a mother. So things like YouTube, and we're talking about years ago, I was lucky enough to be able to network and know so many people that were doing amazing work. And every time I would speak to my students, and they spoke about themselves in such a negative way, it was a time and generation where being Somali was seen as negative. So it was actually a diss, like, you Somali. And that really used to frustrate me because I was like, I'm a really proud Somali. I know so many Somalis that are doing amazing things. So that's where the YouTube came about, just sitting down and talking to people who are doing amazing things. And so that other people can see it, and particularly my students and my children. But what I try and do in every role or every project or anything that I do is try and leverage it to the max. And as an educator, I'm no longer associate senior leader. I'm an assistant head teacher, so that's good.
Correction. Correct the record.
So I try to leverage it as much as possible. So being an assistant head teacher allows me to be able to impact on curriculum. So it means I use my experience, my skills to be able to help find our own culture or heritage or history somehow linked in. So my colleagues who are English teachers, I would introduce them to Somali poetry. So they're doing like work around poetry, I would say, right, have you looked at this Somali poetry? Have you studied this? Can you introduce that to your year 8 class? And they would really do that. In personal development, I'm able to then put things together like PSHE lessons, assemblies, and not just for my Somali kids, but for every child. So inviting speakers to come and do that in assemblies. And it means that every child gets to see a little bit of the history of the child that sits next to them. So it takes away that shame or that single story that they keep hearing, and the children have a sense of pride. So I leverage every opportunity I have to be able to showcase our culture, whether it's, and the radio show was about just all these taboo subjects and things that people weren't discussing. And I felt like as a mother, as a woman, as an educator, I had so much I wanted to say and share, and that's how I did it. In the community, I find that it's probably the nicest and easiest one to do it in, because encouraging the community to come together and celebrate our own culture and identity, and it's through music, literature, arts, food. And when I do that, and I used to do it years ago in the community, again, I give it to the next generation who are doing it much better than me now. But now I tend to do it within our school community. We invite everybody, and it's so well attended. So the last one that we did was just before COVID, and we had a brother come and do a whole history to celebrate Somali history. So he had a whole presentation. He went in so in depth. It was so beautiful to see. Staff came, students came, community came, and obviously we fed them Somali food. We had poetry, and it was a sense of pride. And now I've been in education for 16 years. I will tell you, for the past 16 years, I've seen from going Somali being a diss to now children in Culture Day wearing dra, and and children actually just being able to celebrate and using words. It's so amazing to be in a playground and just using words as Somali. What's that one called? Everyone using it. And I'm like, do you know what that word means? And like, of course I know what it means. Okay. And even wearing the bands of the Somali flag, Somaliland flag, the different types of flags. And these kids are not Somali. Where'd you get that from? My friend gave it to me. My friend gifted me. So for me, for 16 years, that's a huge transition to be able to do that. And so if there's any way I can leverage what I know or who I know or what I can do or get in, that's how I do it. That's how I leverage it.
Yeah. And I think even Deha can add to that, because with your background in education, culture, and the degree that you studied, there's very much like an element of that being like sociology and psychology, and how you kind of use that to frame how you interact with like your own children, and even children that you're wanting to educate through your your folklore and storytelling. So if you just want to add that.
Yeah, I think stories, like, we can relate to stories on so many levels. Sorry. You can relate to stories on so many levels. So, like, there's stories in books, then there's stories in folk tales, then there's stories of the narratives that are around us, whether it's through culture, religion, everything, and our own personal stories that we kind of, you know, as we go through life. So I think that, you know, stories are like, especially in early years, they're so important, because when you share a story, whether it's a book or a story that you're telling, oral story, there's so much things that come within that open so many doors for children, or for things they can explore, and they have the power to kind of like, you know, kind of relate and see, like, kind of create themselves as they're going. And so I think they're so vital in so many ways. And also as a home educator, for like almost 8 years, my children recently went to school. Stories were at the core of like how you know, the way I taught them. So we would have a lot of storytelling, whether it's like stories from my mom or from the library, and that would, you know, open doors to like other subjects and everything like that. And that's how we went about it, because the children really engage with stories. People in general really engage with stories. So yeah, I think it's really brilliant. And also the stories that we create of ourselves, like, you know what I mean, like, to be aware of ourselves and to be aware of the narratives around us. Are we taking in negative narratives? Like, are we actually conscious of ourselves and the story of ourselves that we're creating as we go? Because it really does affect the way you see yourself, the way you see the world, because it is a story that leads our life essentially. So I think it's, you know, really important.
Yeah, I agree, just especially when it comes to like seeing yourself as part of the story, kind of going back to the point that was made earlier, like Somalis don't necessarily have the most positive reputation, right? Especially when we look at the stories that are being told of ourselves, whether it be in film, whether it be in shows. For example, most recently, there's the talk of Top Boy season 3, there being representation of like Somali gangs, right? And we get that Top Boy is centered around that kind of culture, but it's like how Somalis are now integrated into that story and now being portrayed to a wider audience. It's like, how do we then control that narrative? And it really does start with ensuring that we solidify within young people that you are more than this, right? This is not all that you're able to do or all that you're able to be, but ensuring that, you know, those positive stories are being presented to them so that they can, as they grow, make those choices as opposed to like the self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So I think it's really important what both of you guys are doing in your works. And kind of just moving on to like the whole storytelling. We're very much in an age where like, in order for stories to be accessible, there is the translation of stories. But I kind of want to take it one step back and talk about the importance of like preserving the Somali language, whatever region, whatever dialect, guys, but how important it actually is, so that we maintain that history and understanding, because we all know that sometimes when you translate things, it doesn't necessarily, it isn't necessarily a true reflection of what actually is trying to be communicated. So I think I'd love to pass that to Ibrahim and then have the rest of the panel kind of join in.
Yeah, translation is really difficult, especially because, for example, a lot of the Somali poetry that right now has been translated comes from that nomadic tradition, comes from that kind of Gelchira background, right? And they're using the imagery that they're used to. They're talking about camels giving birth, and they're talking about that smell, sahan sahu, that smell just before the rain hits. And they're talking about all of these really specific images and these really specific smells that they're used to. And to translate that into English to make it make sense is really difficult. It's really difficult. I mean, I was asked to translate a poetry for Modern Poetry and Translation that had a Somali issue last year. And wallahi, half the process was me trying to find the poem that I thought would translate the best into English. That was half the struggle, you know, because when you're listening to this poem, it's hitting you, you know what I'm trying to say? But just translating that and making that emotion carry across, not just the words. If I have to use half the line to describe this camel who's at a specific stage of pregnancy, it's going to take away the poetry of the language, isn't it? So it's really, it's quite difficult to translate. But what is really interesting is a lot of modern Somali poetry, because they're now becoming more urbanized and because more people are moving to the cities, that becomes easier to translate. Although they still use some of that older imagery, there's a lot more imagery that is going to make sense to people who are born and raised in an urban environment. Gari's poetry has been translated, Hadrawi's poetry has been translated, Kadara's poetry has been translated, and this kind of stuff is a lot more easier. To be honest, even them, the level of the language they're using is difficult, but still in terms of imagery and keeping that poetic feel in the translation, it becomes easier.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, if you want to, like, basically better your Somali, essentially, the way I kind of, I guess, connected it when I became, you know, I think I was, like, in my late teens, I decided to just kind of, like, open myself up to, like, you know, finding out about stories through family and listening to Somali Saha and everything like that. I know that's, you know, obviously being Muslim and Somali, sometimes it can be a little bit clash, like, but then again, I'm trying to learn Somali, or, you know what I mean? So I think it's a great, like, a door to open, to access your culture, to access your language, and to be engaged. So I think it's just such a good way for us people in the diaspora and the youngsters to kind of, you know, in a fun way, engage with our culture and our language. We have so much beauty in our culture, from the food to everything. There's literally everything there for us. It's just about us kind of changing our mindset, you know, about our culture, and just reconnecting, and especially traveling, things like traveling, which I haven't done enough of. It's, you know, like, I've been, like, what do you call it, homesick, literally, like, my whole life since I came here. And inshallah, I've only gone back once, but I hope to go back a lot and really and truly kind of go to the actual spaces where I was born, like in the Badia, to go there. He doesn't, you know, he's not alive now, but actually my father's wife and kids still live there. So it would be really incredible to just kind of stay with them for a certain amount of time and truly reconnect. So yeah, and just, you know, I think it's a beautiful thing.
If you want. Yeah, perfect. So I guess that kind of goes really nicely into like the next question that I have, which initially I was just going to direct to you, Bar, but I think actually based on the fact that there is like this understanding that there is a difficulty with younger people and Somali families trying to ensure that there is a maintenance of culture within the household, and then, you know, coming from those houses and then going to school where there seems to be a complete identity separation. So I guess, like, what would be the best ways to encourage families, or what difficulties have you seen with identity formation of young Somalis trying to reconcile like their Somali identity with like their Western identity when they're in schools or spaces outside of like the Somali community?
That's a really good question. That's a question we've been asking for decades, I think. I think it's a challenge that faces every diaspora person. I think it's not something that's actually unique to Somalis. But one of the things that I notice, it depends, I'd say, for me, the parents and the generation of parents that gave birth to the children. So my generation are people who were raised here. And I think the level of identity crisis, I think it's lessened only because there's an element of me understanding the Western culture, and they're kind of raised in a way that they can understand and navigate both. What I see a challenge is my older parents, when their children are essentially Londoners, who have, most of them never been back home, born and raised wherever they are, and they have the ills and the same challenges as every Londoner child who's born in London who's British. So, and then also there's an element of Somali Nimo that they're expected to have, but they don't have that. So that, for me, is usually meant to be it's more the relationship between the parent and the child, and the understanding between the parent and the child. Because what I find is when the relationship between the parent and the child is one that's very positive, one that there's a level of understanding, especially if they're able to communicate whether in Somali or English, then it's easier, because then parents are able to then explain that to them. A lot of our students, I'm speaking for some of my own children, don't speak Somali, and I take it for granted that they should supposed to, and I'll say it, and they'll go, "Miss, I don't speak Somali," and I'm like, "I'm so sorry." How comes you don't? But then my own children really don't speak Somali as well. They understand it, but they're not fluent at all. And for me, that's my own fault. It's nobody's fault. It's the system's fault. I was told I was supposed to speak English all the time, and I drank that Kool-Aid, which is bad. But the challenges that I see often is understanding between the parent and the child. And once that there's a level of understanding, it works. But I think that comes with the children getting older. The teenage years are usually the hardest, but once they have a level of maturity, it becomes a lot easier. And the teenage years are the most challenging for any child, irrespective of what identity crisis that they have. But also, I think there is another layer for our children. There's a layer of deen as well, being Muslim, and what that means for them being in a country sometimes where being Muslim is also quite challenging. And so those multifaceted or intersectionality that they have makes it quite challenging for them as young people. And so the best way I would say is for those of us who have the experience, the skills, the knowledge to really try and work with the community. What I have noticed over the years, I think COVID might have partly to do with this. I always found it easier to find volunteers to come and work with my children, to do workshops with them, for the girls, for the boys. It was always easy. After COVID, I really struggle to find volunteers to come and work with our students. And the challenges are getting worse. I think our students are still have a level of understanding or a level of confusion about identity, or what it means. But also, I think it's a little bit unfair for them to have to choose one or the other. And I wonder what the journey would look like for them when there's a merge of different identities, and it's okay for them to be able to celebrate their Somali minimal with their Britishness, with their Muslim identity, with all of that meshed into one. And so we may need to listen to the young people to allow them to create those cultures or identity with a level of support and encouragement.
I just want to touch on something you said that was quite interesting about parents and kids not understanding each other. And I can't emphasize enough, like when I started to learn Somali, I didn't even clock up until then how much of what my mom and dad used to say to me that used to just go over my head. Just because I got the gist of what they were saying, you know, and I understood if they were giving me a command to do that. But when you start to really delve deep into the language and you start actually getting fully what they're saying, it was a whole different relationship developed between me and my mom especially. And even like when you're just talking, when your mom can or your parents can see that you can understand Somali more and you've got a better grasp of the language, they start to express themselves more, because if they're constricting themselves to using a few bits of vocab that you understand, it's it's gonna be difficult for them to try and fully express themselves. So I can even see when my mom's speaking to my little sister versus when she's speaking to me, that it's easier for her to speak to me, and she uses more vocab and she uses wider, and she's able to express herself more clearly and more deeply, and that just creates like a different relationship between your parents and you.
Sorry, can I just say, then we then have to work on either two things. We teach all our children Somali, and we do it properly so that we're able to have a communication with them, or our parents need to learn to speak English so they're able to communicate with the children. There needs to be a path where both be able to communicate comfortably, because what I often get is, Miss Hersey, please help me. And I'm like, I'm trying to help you, but you need to understand, El Mahagani, they're raised in this city, and they are exposed to ills that you may not be aware of, that you're not exposed to, but Hoya and Abba, you need to understand these are all the challenges they're facing. And so they can still be Ilmahagi, and you can raise them as you want, but there needs to be a level of understanding of the challenges they face as young Londoners that are raised in London, born in London, and being a teenager, the hormonal years. I'm sure that we used to do this back home and nobody used to recognize it. But that means but now that just means they're literally going through a stage, and children can go through different stages. And so it's either we work with Walidin Tena, but we work with Arul Tena, but there needs to be a level of understanding on both ends. It can't just be us and the kids, because the kids are the ones who are lost somewhere in the middle.
I was going to add, like from my generation, sort of people who were either born here or came quite young. I've actually have a cousin who explained that, because there's just so much on her plate. Like she has to everything. She needs to sort that out. It's like Somali nam ina bara. She's like, I threw that one to the side. So it's like you have to have that kind of understanding and empathy for like parents and what they go through and just how much is on their plate, and especially this country and trying to preserve the culture and the religion of the child. You're like, okay, you know what, I need to get that on that. But I feel like we should still kind of encourage and just still try, like those of us that are parents, and don't worry too much that we're going to fail in other ways. And also another thing is like spaces, like me myself, like growing up as I've always been a creative, but like sort of not necessarily I wasn't in the environment of creative people. My family didn't really, it was like Quran kena but not school kena, and that's what it was. And I think it's just spaces like this, we need more of them, because it's just like it just shows that you can be all the facets of you and be proud, and and kind of teaching us like where we come from, the culture that we come from, and how important it is. And I was disconnected for so long until I actually started for my own self looking into it, because I feel like just my parents or my family prioritized, we need our kids to be like on the deen, and that's how they're gonna, you know what I mean? And they didn't mean in any sort of negative way, but personally for me, I kind of, you know what I mean? I needed that, and I was able to kind of find it in spaces like this, which are brilliant, alhamdulillah.
It is changing though. If you see plays like Duksi Days, and we need writers who are writing Black Joy, Somali stories. I think there's a short story coming up called Mona that's going to be on BBC. So slowly are going to change, and the more next generation will have an input in that, because they're going to be our next creative and our next leaders. And I say, if we treat, whether it's parents or whether it's children, we talk about this and we support each other, and it comes from a place of love and encouragement, and there's generosity and grace given with the journeys, whether it's parents or children. I think that's where we need to be. We are more critical than being more generous. I think we need to be generous to the
100%.
children and generous to the parents.
Yeah,
but
and also
all we need to do that.
exactly,
inshallah.
and also if you've got like something to share, like just share it. Like try to find these spaces and kind of, because you'll be amazed like how many people you inspire and change their lives. And kind of, even me, like when I never sort of basically I was encouraged by Cade poetry night that I watched on YouTube, and that's what I was like, oh, I want to do that. So, you know, just go for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely agree with the point of intersectionality being something that isn't necessarily like looked into. And so the terminology itself was coined by a woman by the name of Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a US professor. If you don't know about her, get to know her, because she's done amazing works, right? And she just kind of delves into like the different layers of identity and all the different barriers that we face, and how all of those problems kind of like come together all at once. And I think when we look at like the family dynamic and how history is kind of like told through the stories that we share, and even identity formation and the issue of it being separate, having to choose whether or not you're Somali or British or Somali and this, Somali and that. I think for people who are in their like younger and like developmental years, it's such an ask of us to tell them to define that. It's like, you know, when we did our GCSEs and it was like, you have to pick 4 GCSEs so that the rest of your life is like panned out, and then you get to A level and then you get to university, and it's like, oh, I want to do a U-turn actually. This is not what I want to be solidified. So I think that's just something to think about. What I wanted to kind of like move on to quickly, just because I'm aware of time and I know that we could go into so much more, but I kind of want to divert this to Ibrahim and just talk about like the means of accessibility for all of this like poetry and storytelling and oral tradition, and like what we can actually do to ensure that it is accessible to younger generations.
Definitely, I think one of the, we've talked a lot about how things have developed. One of the amazing developments has been that there's so much more translations happening, and there are so many more translators coming out on both sides. Actually, I mean, in back home, they're doing a great job in translating English texts into Somali. You know, we got Fanon being translated, Pedagogy of the Press was translated last year. So we got all of these amazing texts being translated. But on the reverse as well, there are a lot of young Somalis and even, you know, Adam people who are translating Somali texts into English, Somali poetry into English, Somali short stories into English. But also, I think there needs to be some effort on the people who want to gain access into this, and who want to gain access into this, you know, this sea of knowledge. You know, if you want to understand more about your culture, if you want to connect more with your parents, if you want to delve deep into, because Somali poetry isn't just, you know, nice words. It's for thousands of years, this was how knowledge was preserved. This was how culture was preserved. And so we've got such a rich archive of knowledge and history. And so if you really want to access that, there needs to be some effort for you to engage and for you to kind of learn Somali, and for you to get people in your family, maybe the elder generation, to come and help you translate it, because genuinely it will do a lot for yourself. It will do a lot for your understanding of what Somali Nima is, what it is to be Somali. And so, yeah, I think, you know, on one hand we're seeing, you know, even myself, I've translated a lot of Somali poems that have been published. So that's one thing, but there's too much to be translated. You know, there needs to be, if you want it, you gotta go after it. You know what I'm saying?
It's so true, because everyone will scream, I want access, and then it's provided to you, and then nobody accesses it. And so it's like this constant revolving door of like, oh, I feel so out of tune with my history and my legacy and like the stories that are lost. And then there are people like Ibrahim and so many other people who are doing the work to like translate it, and it takes time and effort, like you said, and then no one's really accessing it. So I guess like the job is being done, the work is being done. It's just kind of like, now we have to throw it back to you guys and be like, okay, how much do you really want it then? Because we can't look back in 20 years and be like, oh my God, I didn't know X, Y, and Z, and have another man write a book by the name of Andrew something telling us about, you know, our history, because I don't know if that can run, to be honest. But last but not least, I kind of just want everybody to be able to tap into you guys. So is there anything that you're currently working on, future projects that kind of relate to like the theme of like preserving our history, identity formation, and just the oral storytelling side of things, or even just anything that people should be aware about in your own works, in your own fields of professionalism or education?
Yeah, so right now my main project is I'm working on a series of papers looking at Southern Somali meter, and specifically as well, so with each paper there's a certain poet we attach as, like I kind of use as a hook in that poetry to kind of look at the meter of that form. So I hope the next one is on a poetry form called Gable Shimbir, but one after that we're going to be looking at the work of a female poet called Makai Garare, who was from the Shabelle region, I believe it was around Johar, Mahadai, that kind of region. And
My peoples.
That's
My
it.
peoples.
That's it. And then, for example, just to give a little taste of some of her poetry, so it was like the couplets I was talking about before. She was very active in the independence struggle, and a lot of the poetry reflected that struggle. And she said, "Ged kila gogo ya gebela harayo, horta ya geridi da yo logo gondiha." So the tree that is cut, the stump will always remain. Who here is scared of death that you can threaten it to? So she's basically saying, if the colonialist kills me, the movement will live on. So, you know, you can't threaten me with death. And another time she said, Allah musta'an, masar ged mogoyo, ged kala kudaban. Masar ged mogoyo, ged kala kudaban. Gal minu Islam within, namaso galan. The tree, the axe wouldn't be able to cut the tree if part of the tree was not in the axe, meaning the handle of the tree, you know? You can't just do anything with the metal head of the axe, right? So, and then she says, Gal minu Islam within Namaso Galen. If the colonizers did not have with them Somali supporters, there's a not friendly term I would use, like in Wafante, this is being recorded. Islam, they will not be able to overpower us. So it's because of people ourselves who are kind of betraying the enabling, the enabling the colonialists that they're able to. So that is a poet's work who a paper that I'm currently preparing.
As for me, actually, recently I've just sort of been very much into journaling and kind of taken a break from, like, you know, the short stories and the poetry, and a few months ago I started sharing a few on Instagram, so I'm kind of just taking it kind of how it comes, going with the flow, and maybe continuing to share and continuing to keep writing, and hopefully start taking writing courses, because that's something that's literally been at the back of my mind for like way too long. So yeah, that's where I'm at the moment.
I'm going to say one thing is, if you are able to offer any time, or know anybody who's willing to offer some time, please do get in contact with me. On Twitter, I'm Bar Nomad. And this is for me to work with the young people, the next generation of Somali kids who desperately need the current generation of Somali kids, Somali adults, young adults. The other thing is, I find writing quite cathartic. I use it as a way just to express myself. I haven't written poetry for such a long time, and I was telling everyone earlier on, the few poems that I actually love and that I have is basically because of Warsan Shire. And it's because I did a couple of our workshops, and if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be able to form those poems. But I write, so I have my own blog, and often it's just about being Somali, about being a Hoyo, about being an educator, and I write as often as I possibly can. And so if you go on my Twitter page, there's a link there. But apart from that, I get myself involved in wherever I can get myself involved, whether it's hosting, doing anything to do creative. I'm actually a creative at heart. If it wasn't for Hoya, I think I'd have been an actress, because I was supposed to be an actress. But I was told that I wasn't, at 16, I had done a play. It was my final GCSE drama play. I loved acting. When I was in Djibouti, I grew up in Djibouti. I used to be able to, I was an actor child. I used to do it in theatres, and I absolutely loved it. Came to the UK, obviously didn't speak the language, so the one way I could get into my drama club was to work backstage until I acquired the language. Once I acquired the language, I was able to take part in the plays, And then I picked it for GCSEs, absolutely loved it. Final piece, I had 2 agencies that came to me and my friend who's Eritrean. And they were like, oh, we'd love to sign you up, talent agencies. And I said, Hoya, look, finally you made it. Been doing this since I was 8 years old or 7 years old. And I was told, so like, well, you did it low. So I said, I didn't bring you to the UK so you can kiss some boy on TV. So I was told no. And so I think I was supposed to always be a creative at heart. So I'll always be in touch with anything that's creatively being done. So that's me.
I think if you're Somali, like, it's just within you. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, like, it's just in our DNA to be able to be, like, these expressive, performative people who, like, engage in, like, creation and, like, preservation and just doing the thing. Like, similar to you, like, when I was growing up, I was a drama kid, and then I had to switch to the academia. And it's like, to this day, I can still play drums and guitar, but, like, I have nowhere to showcase that. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, the image doesn't image. It's not making sense, kind of thing. So, yeah, I think definitely if there's anybody here today who feels like they can lend their expertise and times, please do get in contact, because it definitely is about supporting the community and ensuring that we actually pay it forward, because I'm sure that when we were growing up, we could have definitely done with a lot more of that. And I think the challenges that young people are facing now are, I don't want to say they're worse, but they're a lot more intense, right? So it's like, if we're able to create those third culture spaces and safe spaces, that would be great. But to end on that note, thank you so much to all the panelists. Can we get them a round of applause? And with that, we're actually just going to go straight into, I believe, a portion of performance by yourself. Is that correct? Yeah. So Ibrahim is actually going to, although he gave us a bit of a taste at the end there, he's actually going to take the mic and share with us some of his work.
Yeah, so these 2 poems, they're like tackling quite environmental themes. So this first one is kind of looking at, how the global south are responsible for very little of, global warming, but they suffer with majority of the consequences. So a ship that moves through sand and rocky terrain, each of its sides named but not branded. You don't pain what sustains you, even riding it is taboo. Balanced across earth, its movements cut like coral across borders and barriers. The nation state cannot imprison sustenance. At one point, like a can of deodorant in the sun, it'll explode. Each year the grass grows greyer and shorter, more tough. Mars the earth like the shadow of a bruise, sustains fewer and fewer. See the ground pucker and constrict around what little it can. Watch it spit itself out, command itself against the othered, take back what it wills. Some would rather cull others than curb their desires. They've skinned the earth of its patina, left it ashy and convulsing, and their solution is to kill half of the human populace. Electrical grids wrap the earth like ley lines. Nomads charge their phones on solar panels and rivers dry up. Here, the conscious suffer the worst price. Yeah. So this second piece was part of a larger project that I was doing, where I was replying to Somali poets. So each one would take like an image from a Somali poem that I liked, and then it would like reply. Again, this one is quite, it's tackling environmental themes, global warming, looking at the effect that nuclear waste being dumped on the Somali shores has had on the people that live there, the fishermen, the nomads. So the line that I was replying to was a line by Sayyid Muhammad Abdullahi Hassan. He says, Bad garirtay mawchada gurhamay ga'amadi ailda. A trembling sea, roaring waves hitting the peninsula of Ale. So they came in waves, tore through the hull, through metal wire. Nothing tastes like ruined fish, toxic waste and salt. Hunger will push you, the kind that starts from your legs, has you standing, walking, jittering until you wither from the top down. It'll propel you, last ditch, an emergency protocol. Allah mayr ma tagin miyina uma bixin oo marantidayda lama soo ballamin Allah maal la'aan wuxuu meerayaa. Oh God, I have not gone to Mayr nor the countryside, and I have not made plans to meet with my wife. Oh God, look how he roams, destitute. That bombing did something to us. the near-death British fire, the men sick with malaria, that also did something to us. The boats that glide in the morning, return with song, tired with unmade promises on their chest, that also did something to us. When the Haji, the winged one, the dervish remnant, left nothing but poems on old age, that did something to us. When they came with ships, left Barawa, shell of whitewashed carcass, Sayla, a city-wide resting place, did that not do something to us? When they came with ships, left Ale, all our seasides nuclear, did that not do something to us? Allah mayr ma tagin miyana uma bixin oo marantidayda lama soo ballamin Allah ma la'aan wuxuu meerayaa. Oh God, I have not gone to Mayor, nor the nomadic interior, and I have not made plans to meet with my wife. Oh God, look how he roams, destitute. 90s, the decades that made us dance for it, stapled our faces, a sloping grin belied by eyebrows. They are not stewards, willful failures. It would not be how it is now were it not for them. They have no liver. God, do you not know how important it is? The liver? They have no chest. Take up space like starvation, like milk in the belly, like darkness in an eclipse, ever expanding. What is the difference between somebody who breaks a promise and somebody who refuses to make one? Elaine, they both leave people wanting, waiting, things in patience, wives in wilderness. Faith, I guess. Do they not know that grief is for our bellies? You cannot write an elegy hungry. Allah mayr ma tagin, miyina uma bixin, oo marantidayda lama soo ballamin. Allah ma la'aan wuxuu meerayaa. Oh God, I have not gone to Mayor, nor the nomadic interior, and I have not made plans to meet with my wife. Oh God, look how he roams, destitute. Did they not read about us before they returned in their funny masks, their weak disguises? We know how to defend. A nomad knows there's nothing worse than hunger. A fisherman knows there's nothing worse than an empty catch. Fish turn slick with oil, track poison onto shore. Goliath fills his belly with a vestige. I will not berate my people for standing up for what is theirs. I will not say to them patience and faith anymore. I will have shame in that regard. Allah mayr matagin, miyana uma bixin, oo marantidayda lama soo ballamin. Allah ma la'aan wuxuu meerayaa. Oh God, I have not gone to Mayor, nor the countryside, and I have not made plans to meet with my wife. Oh God, look how he roams, destitute. When you compel them to weigh their bellies with stone, to rub cotton onto their teeth, to lips brine, remnant of millet, do not be surprised when they rise like metropolises and cover the sky, open the sea and earth and leave the whole world witness. A fisherman's song is nothing if not a drought of the back brain, a prospering of his subconscious, a story hidden, something dormant, a warning, a war song. Allah ma la'aan wuxuu meerayaa. Oh God, look how he roams, destitute. This is one in Somali, but don't worry, I'm gonna translate it for you, man, at the end, yeah. But this is like probably the first piece that I ever wrote that I put out there in Somali, because my Somali Inca still mafante that I quite like to do all this the cultural stuff. It's still a bit shaky, but yeah. I had a when I wrote this, I was like, this is gonna be crazy. 500 verses, it's gonna be epic, and then I got 6 verses in, I said tap out. But yeah. Bismillah. In dhaweydba kama maalin godol gabayadaydiiya guurowga tirintiis bulshada uma guddoonsiina gaaraarna waataan ka tagay gocashadiisii gayrna uma anlaabane anaa duugay gaaleefta gaashaan anoon sidan maxaan tuuray gamaskayga gafna kuma tiraabin maxaan gooy hadalkay gurgurshaaga uma rarin hayaan geedi socod dheere hawa gaarahu uma lii halkan galabta soo dayray gabi baan dushii saaran oo geesna qamawaa gocashadu mar bay halistahoy gaari talisaa damacuna mar buu godob dhalaa ood ku gubataa gumaystuhu labunbuu mid yahay gabi ahaantiisa mid garashada kaa weeraroon gamasba kuu qaadan iyo mid geysh kuu soo diriyo gumciyo soo faysan godobteenu waa noo caddahay goor iyo allayl gashiguna cabdoo wuu maqnaago iyo jiilaal taariikhda waxa gala ninka gaara libintiisa gacantiisa kaasaa ku qora godoba yeelkeeda waxa gurbaanka loo tumi ninka goosta mirhiis afartaa magaashaamayow garabka mawtaagay gammaanka iyo sidii faras miyaan gees walba u jiiray garcasta iyo odayadii miyaan geed kugu geey. So that's the Somali. So when I was writing this one, I was really wanted to talk about, I was looking at our political culture and I just thought, this is so dirty, man. So I was just thinking, I want to really look at how the effect of colonialism, what the effect of colonialism on our political culture was. So, but yeah, it's not really complete, but I started off with like an introduction. I said, I haven't, in the way, but recently I have not milked my poetry, but then I go in and I say, gumaystuhu labun buu mid yahay gabi ahaantiisa mid garashada kaa weeraroon gamasba kuu qaadan iyo mid geysh kuu soo diriyo gumciyo soo faysan. So colonialists are two types. Mid garashada kaa weeraray, so one that attacks your mind and the way you think and your knowledge on gamasba kuu qaadan, who doesn't have to pick up a blade, ma fahantay? Iyo mid geysh kuu soo diriyo gumciyo soo faysan, and one that sends armies, and bullets and guns and all of that. But obviously we know that Somali suffered from both. And then, Godab Tano wa no addahay gori alel, we know exactly what our grievances are, Gashigun abdawu maqna goyi chilal, and our debt hasn't been paid for a very long time. Tarikh the waxa gala ninka gaara libintiisa. History really recounts the one who takes his victory, the one who does something, who achieves something. That's who history recounts. He writes his version of the events. The drums are banged for the one who takes the fruits, And then, but yeah, basically that's the main point of the poem. Thank you.
Thank you so much. One more round of applause. Our next poet is Abdullahi, also known as Poetical's Corner, a talented Somali poet and dedicated educational facilitator. Abdullahi actively collaborates with the Poetry Society, where he passionately crafts enriching workshops for young students, meticulously honing their poetic talents while exploring a diverse array of themes like identity and hope. His poetry delves into the themes of grief, mental health, and the love of his motherland. Through his captivating verses, Abdullahi passionately advocates for the male generation to bravely embrace and express their emotion, as he firmly believes that every individual deserves to have their voice heard. His gift believes that every individual deserves to have their voice heard, and constructing expressive lines become a heartfelt blessing, enabling him to provide solace and understanding to those grappling with their own struggles. Round of applause after that.
Assalamu alaikum. All right, then we're going to add a couple, yeah? I get a couple more ajr than me, mashallah. I haven't done this in a very long time, and I'm honored to be here with my partner. My little one is 18 months. Apologies if she causes any distractions. I know she's a character, and I can know that she's trying to run towards me. I do have some family members in the back as well, my sisters, who I am honored to share the stage with. I am proud to be here to share some of my poetry. Whilst everybody was sharing their experiences, I was thinking, how do I start this? Do I go deep straight for the jugular, or do I start off very slow and then dive deeper? So this first one is called, what is it called actually? So this one is called My Heart Belongs to the Wet Soils of Africa. Bismillah. My heart belongs to the wet soils of Africa that my feet have never touched. My eyes belong to the sweet delicacy that is sold on the corner of every road. My tongue belongs to lughdi or khalbige ja'al. I'll never allow another language to steal the emotions we express in good times and bad. My mind belongs to the people whose roots are firm. Detkegi, my people. Digeni, my blood. Run, my children, be free. Manta wa malinkena, today is our day. The combination of burr and sambus lingering so heavily on our taste buds, reminding me of who I am and where I belong. The burning unsi, the coal, embracing us, holding each other in hand, the sweet scent tugging my clothes, lasting for eternity, calling out to Hoyo, Ha ma'ano, yes my love. In an angelic voice she'd respond, our dialect the purest form of Gabe, our hearts beat as one with passion, like rhythm of Barambur, fluorescent Garabsar, and let me not say it anymore, Wa'ab. Da'as, Ma'awis, and a dyed beard, you can say that's our starter pack. The tales we'd share with Gahwa, coffee in one hand, whilst our palms cuddle the buskut, with halwa in between. We are a nation that prides itself in khosl, laughter, and sherko, storytelling, with beginnings that begin with hope, and a middle with tears, and ending with hab and ma'. My heart belongs to the wet soils of Africa that my feet have never touched. That's my first one, Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair. It's been a long time since I've performed, and I guess I take on the energy that I'm given, so I appreciate it. Jazakallah khair. And Baba's here, Baba, don't worry. We're going to go home soon, don't worry. Don't worry, Baba. Hannah Amber's going to be waiting for us, don't worry. So this next piece is now going to go for our juggler. And before I start this piece, I just wanted to make a small dua for all of us, for all of our loved ones that we have lost, that have passed away. May Allah have mercy upon them all, our mothers, our fathers, our uncles, aunts, and all our family members, friends and family. May Allah have mercy upon them and raise their ranks. I know which one of my sisters that is. I pray you find solace whilst being lost in these cosmos, searching for answers in every galaxy your eye visits. How is it that one can lose a loved one so often? A whirlwind of emotions leeching off your tears like an infection eating your insides. And you're able to see what's left on the outside. An empty corpse patrolling these streets, a path you never wanted to take. The dim streetlights, a reflection of your eyes. The spark has faded from a place that was once so radiant. Losing my father opened wounds that weren't ever supposed to be touched. Losing my grandmother poked the wounds mercilessly. And losing my grandfather tore apart wounds before it began healing. Like a vulture eating its prey. You wanted to know what it felt like, walking in my shoes. This is far from it. Whilst you sleep peacefully at night, I begin to guard over my heart before my mind drives it into insanity. I plead with my soul not to flee. I lay beside my beloved, praying you don't ever hear these tears, praying you don't ever leave before me. My poetry would end with you. I envy this poet within me, for it tells the truth. These fingers could never tell. I am -3, for I can no longer see what happiness brings. Wherever this pen goes, death follows. Jazakallah khair. This one is one of my favorite pieces. I performed this the last couple of years ago at the Somali Week Festival, and I feel comfortable enough to share it with all of you guys, since we are all proud Somalis. Regardless of our backgrounds, we're all proud of our heritage. And there's a joke amongst my work colleagues. My manager always says, you say you're Somali, but where's your melanin? And I'm like, For me to discuss that with you, that's a whole chapter I've got open to you. So this poem is not related to it, but it's an ongoing joke that I have with my manager. My poetry is dipped in melanin, ripened by the glory of our mother tongue as we exchange sun-kissed hugs, fused with stories of when we were young, our eyes like pearls sailing through the seas, coconut water quenches our thirst. We breathe in cassava sprinkled with chili and doused in lemon. Our smiles can be seen coastline to coastline. We break sunflower seas like the shackles once held us together. We will not forget the souls that carried our homes on their backs. We hear the screams of our ancestors whilst we pick our wheat. Hymns placed into our roots so we may never forget the land we may never forget the land that we walk upon. We are tamed lion turned kings. Mothers giving birth to queens while their hands stitched by the sorrow of death. Fathers plucking and ploughing through the seasons, hoping their sons may return another night. Our daggers finally sharpened to scare away whatever threat may come. We pray we never use it, so poetry has become our moonlight. We rise to the aroma of tea, our fingers stained in yesterday's memories, our hearts moisten in the remembrance of him. African proverbs engraved into our homes, Akhli mali, Akhli mali, knowledge is wealth. So how could I ever forget the sand that welcomed me back when I felt homesick? So forgive me if you find me standing by the shore, washing my hands of the sins that we've carried for so long. My poetry is dipped in melanin, ripened by the glory of our mother tongue. Jazakallah khair.
One more round of applause. I was going to say Akhnini Mali or Akhlini Mali. Inside joke. Last but not least, to keep the fun and the jokes going, we have Somali-born comedian Simba Rabsha is a winner of the notorious Top Secret Gong Show 2022 and Big Belly Ding Dong Show September 2022, as well as a finalist in the Max Turner Prize 2022. Give a round of applause for that. Simba's quick-fire delivery and self-reflective material has made him one to watch on the comedy circuit, and I'm not going to lie, I'm really ready for this, so no pressure. Round of applause.
All right, give it up for everyone you've seen so far. Bloody hell. I'm watching everyone's talking about trauma, talking about our past, powerful stuff, and I'm in the back going, bum jokes, dick jokes, what do I do? So I'm Simba, I'm half Arab, half Somali, so I came out Indian. I say it doesn't bother me, but when I go to a Somali funeral, they're like, why is the guy from the off-license here? I'm like, oh. First of all, that's racist, and that Red Bull's 250, cash or card. Yeah. Here's the thing, like, my little brother, he's full Somali. Yeah, like full, like we have different dads. He's full Somali. He's taller than me, darker than me. He's got their hair and everything. And I knew how Somali he was because one day, like, I picked him up from school. This is back when he was like year 3. Came home. My sister opens the door. He runs to the kitchen. He goes, Hoya, Hoya, can I have some lahuh? Now that is like that's how Somali he is. Like I know that one day he's gonna get bidar as well. Alright. I think that's the first time I've done that joke. That's good. A bit about me. I used to be in the army. I don't know if you guys don't like that, but it's true. They use me mainly for target practice. Yeah. I remember one time, like, we had this test on countering explosive devices, right? And at the end of it, we had a test to figure out if we knew what the parts to a bomb were, and everyone looked at me for the answers. I was like, bro, why would you assume that as the switch, as the initiator, as the main charge? I actually almost joined the Navy. And the guy said to me, Simba, you're going to be dealing with counter-piracy and counter-terrorism. I said, bro, I'm trying to get away from my family. All right, I thought it was going to go a bit weird there. Enforcing stereotypes. Here's the thing with the way I look. Like, I get these fantasies, right? That I'll be on a bus one day, and there's going to be a group of Somali girls in the back. They're going to be like, who's this Timachilla guy? Like, making fun of me and stuff in Somali. And I'll turn around and be like, Fatada Osha Gorea. The father and different. And just to see their faces go, oh, okay. Here's the thing, like, I get made fun of in my family, because obviously, like, the way I look, got soft hair. Like, I've got an uncle, but here's the thing. I gained a little weight recently, so my uncle started calling me Buran Mars. I wrote that one today. I thought it would go well. You know, I remember, like, listen, I'm going to go on with the theme where we're talking about our country, our past, all right? I remember in primary school, the teacher asked all the ethnic kids in my class, like, write down something your country's famous for. And as a joke, I went, Miss, I can't spell genocide. That's it. All right, I had to change that bit because it's actually dirtier than that. Guys, I shouldn't even be here tonight. It's my sister's... I'm serious, it's my sister's 10th wedding anniversary. Let's get a whoop for her. Woo! She's 19. You walked right into it. So did she, though. So did she. Even the interpreter's laughing. That's good. I wish it wasn't a true story. No, it's not true. It's not true. You know, there's a stereotype that Arab men, like, I'm sure all of you have been on Edgware Road, right? Yeah? Where else do you go for Eid, right? Having shisha? Yeah, I've seen you lot there. And let's be honest, Arab guys, there's a stereotype that we are the perviest men on earth. Because it's true. Like, I don't know if you guys seen us, the way some of them look at women. Like, they walk down the street on Edgware Road and they turn around and they go, yeah. Do you like falafel? No. I forgot what I was going to talk about. So that's the truth about comedy. That's the thing. It actually happens. With poetry, you can just stand there, say a lot of stuff. No one has to say anything, and no one laughs or whatever. But you just do it and you do your job. I come up here look like a. Sorry, I was going to say a bad word. Like an idiot, and that's going to look bad. Because there's a lot of negativity about Somalia, right? I try and end my shows by telling a positive story about it. All right, so what would you say? Did you just say I was Bengali? No, I'm messing around. I made that up. Well, here's the thing. Like, I make a point of telling a positive story about Somalia, right? Because I make a lot of jokes about it, so it's time to say some good stories about it. So at the end of the show, I tell people a story about how I came here when I was 4 years old. Right? And it was a tough time for all of us, like my family, because we were poor, we didn't have anything. A lot of people dying all around us, and I don't have any toys. I'm just a little boy. Nothing gave me any joy as a kid, apart from this horse that my dad used to use for work. And I used to tell the horse all the time, because I played with it, like, I love you. I don't think the horse ever believed me, because I'd say I love you to the horse, and the horse would be like, I got you. All right, guys, thank you very much.
Thank you first and foremost for everybody who's been in attendance this evening. The energy has been superb. Like, we wouldn't be able to have like such a meaningful and fruitful conversation, as well as perform to the level that everybody has performed, if you guys didn't give us the energy. So I want you to give yourselves a round of applause real quick. Did you enjoy the night, guys? Yeah? I need a little bit more extra, like... Okay, beautiful. So this is just an indication of what Cade has been able to do in partnership with Oxford House. This is the third event of the Creative Cafe series. So if you like what you've seen, if you've enjoyed yourself this evening, please do look out for the next event. As Hannah said in the beginning of the evening, like the link will go out. Just make sure to kind of like get your tickets, inshallah. I think it's going to be on the 20th of September. 20th of September. Perfect. Without further ado, thank you, everyone.